Shin Godzilla vs. Cloverfield. Two sea monsters that were provoked by humanity's actions and go on a massive rampage across the city. But in reality, they are actually quite tragic creatures that really are just beasts that were provoked by humanity's actions into rampage. These two creatures are really well known modern kaiju, and between these two apocalyptic creatures, who is truly the biggest threat today? Let's find out. But before we begin, we're going to set a bit of a rule. We are only using Baby Cloverfield from the original Cloverfield movie and fourth form Shin Godzilla. These are the main two we will be using for the calculations, no adult Cloverfield or evolution, for the simplification of the matchup. But anyways, with those rules out of the way, let's introduce our characters. Shin Godzilla was originally some type of marine creature, something that realistically should have gone extinct many years ago, but the creature survived for a long time. But eventually, after exposure and feeding off of America's nuclear waste that was dumped into the Tokyo Bay in the 1950s, the results ended up being devastating, with this creature being mutated into what could amount to as a living nuclear reactor. At first, this creature started out as a massive aquatic creature, but as time went along, it was eventually able to give itself the ability to finally go onto land with its second form. This form able to travel on land at about speeds of 3.6 meters per second or 8.05 miles per hour. This creature being able to destroy boats and bridges, even pushing down an entire building with its size of around 28 meters tall. And with this size and speed, he would be able to exert forces of at minimum around 18 megajoules just by moving around. But that's not where it ends for this creature, because this creature evolved even further, eventually going into its third form, growing around 57 meters tall, and eventually becoming its fourth form, the Shin Godzilla, with this creature being a massive 118.5 meters tall. And at this point, the military could do barely anything to harm this thing, with its skin being tough enough to make bullets bounce off of it, and explosions doing almost nothing to this creature, with it terrorizing Tokyo, and the worst of all, this creature had a bit more power than its other forms, with his evolution giving him the power of the atomic breath, a specialized, evolved, adapted nuclear beam that was able to shred through the military with ease. But unlike other versions of Godzilla, this Godzilla was able to fire it not only out of his mouth, but also his tail and even his back, being able to hit from all sides of him, and made him almost impossible to deal with. And even when they were able to hurt this thing, this creature was able to heal and adapt even more. But how strong exactly is this thing at its full power? To figure that out, we need to look at its other forms, because Shin Godzilla, even in his second form, was able to radiate enough heat off his body to boil the surrounding water near the shore of Tokyo, and based off of his size and the area of water being affected, being seemingly around 84 meters large, and taking into account where the water is, that means that his second form was able to endure the heat and output 1.3 to 10 kilotons of TNT, and this only increases with his forms. Scaling up from his third form's height of 57 meters, this means he would be enduring and exerting energy of around 11 to 110 kilotons of TNT. And finally, using this upscaling, the final form of Shin Godzilla from this, he would be able to endure forces of around anywhere from 98 to 985 kilotons of TNT, with this being around town to large town level of forces that Shin Godzilla would be enduring and exerting through just heat alone. This is even more backed up by showing how it is constantly in pain, meaning he's probably constantly enduring similar forces, and the fact that it said the only weapon that could really take him out was a nuclear bomb, which would mean that these durability ranges are very highly likely the case in terms of its upper limits. But Shin also gets a relatively bit faster from his second form and fourth form than he was in his first form. Even if it's a little hard to tell if Shin's fourth form is the same speed as the third form, at best this form would be traveling at around 20 meters per second or 44.7 miles per hour, even if this is a pretty generous calculation. But Shin's most prominent and most powerful feature is its atomic breath. The atomic breath being so strong that its exhaust alone was able to cause around 30 kilotons of TNT spreading around Tokyo. But when fully powered, that exhaust gets condensed down into a beam of pure radiation and light, with the condension rate being able to cleave buildings instantaneously, with this potentially getting into around the 3 megatons ranges of power. And at a high end, this beam could get around 10 megatons, putting him around the small city to city levels per beam. And as we mentioned before, he can not only fire this out of his mouth, but also his tail and back, with his maximum amount of beams that he can fire out at a time being around 23 at once, making him able to output energy of around 69 to 230 megatons of TNT, putting him even further into the city levels and potentially into the mountain levels with a full barrage. And finally, going back to his speed, while his travel speed isn't anything special, being relatively slow as we covered, this creature can also react to jet planes and missiles in the sky, being able to hit these planes and missiles very casually, putting him in around Mach 2 to Mach 5 reaction speeds. And if we really push it, we could potentially get to Mach 14, although this is really pushing the casualness of the reaction speed. But this creature is almost unstoppable. But despite all of this, the creature is not completely unstoppable. It still has a limit, with this creature being able to exhaust himself of his energy, and after using all of his energy, is forced to become dormant and still. And while this creature may not be an idiot, it's not exactly the smartest thing either. Being a creature mostly of pain from its mutation, most of the time it doesn't pay full attention to its surroundings, even if he can track things, and does have some basic level of understanding of stuff hitting him, like planes and missiles, but by no means is Shin a strategist, and can be exploited of these weaknesses, as we see at the end of the film, with him completely freezing over after being exposed to a coagulant, freezing Shin, just before his evolution continued. But despite this defeat, Shin was absolutely one of the most devastating creatures humanity has ever faced. And if he were ever allowed to continue, humanity as a whole might be done for. Now moving on to Cloverfield. The monster known simply as Clover, a massive towering monster that appeared seemingly out of nowhere, crawling up from the deep Atlantic Ocean in 2008, and completely leaving New York in ruins. But the overall origin of this creature is relatively unknown. Some say it was just a creature hiding in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, with it finally being awoken with a satellite crashing into the ocean. Others say it might not even be of this planet or even of this dimension, arriving on a meteor. No matter how you put it, this creature is certainly an unknown anomaly. You might even be able to call him a paradox. But regardless, this creature is certainly a powerful one, with this creature being a monstrous 82 meters tall, its physical strength alone being able to rip off the head of Lady Liberty, decimate buildings, being able to take all sorts of military weapons directly at it without going down, and making it even more of a threat the creatures that come off its back, being massive dog-sized parasites that can cause an effect so potent that it literally makes people explode internally. Under its siege, it seems like a monster that can't be stopped. But let's break down how strong this thing really is. Clover, for its size, is extraordinarily fast. When it can travel across Manhattan with speeds of around 138.5 miles per hour, and leapt so fast that it intercepted a helicopter with speeds that can be calculated to be around 163 to 281 miles per hour. This creature can also exert forces that can collapse the Woolworth building to a degree around 133 tons of TNT, enough to decimate multiple city blocks. But even this is a surface level comparison to his best when we factor in the casual sustained structures that were being destroyed of bridges and buildings. At its peak, it could potentially get up to the striking strength of around 1 kiloton of TNT, enough to destroy a small town. And nothing the military could throw at this thing could take it down. From missiles to bombs, this creature shrugged it off casually. And if we take the meteor feat literally, the crash landing to Earth, the creature would have been taking forces around 75 megatons of TNT, being in the city level ranges of durability. But while this creature may be powerful and unlike anything humanity has ever seen before, it does have its weaknesses. Cloverfield, while may be imposing, in truth, what he really is a baby. A creature that doesn't really understand what's going on, stressed from humanity with the rampage that it does, mostly being out of disturbance more than anything. And in the end of the day, humanity was able to take it out, with the final plan with the US bringing out something called the Hammer Down Protocol, a full bombing run across Manhattan, finally putting Clover down for good. Or did it? Despite them saying that this creature was one of the casualties, at the end of Cloverfield Paradox, we see a massive creature so big that its head reached above the clouds. The creature grew up and became a monster. But regardless if this creature is truly still alive or not, this is certainly a paradox of an anomaly, something that we may not ever fully figure out. But regardless, baby or not, this creature certainly is a threat, and we may not know how much further this threat can really go. But now that we've looked at our two combatants, let's see who is truly humanity's ultimate devastator. To put it simply, these two creatures have a lot of advantages against each other. Starting with physical strength, Clover takes the advantage really easily. This creature is at minimum able to exert forces around 133 tons of TNT to potentially even a kiloton. Shin at best, using his speed and his size, would be around 5 tons of TNT from walking around, meaning Cloverfield would be 26.6 to 200 times stronger than anything we've seen Shin accomplish physically. And in terms of speed, it's no surprise Clover is way faster in travel. Again, even if we massively highball Shin and compare him to the third form, which could go around 44.7 miles per hour, even with the most generous of calculations, Cloverfield would still be massively faster by around 3.6 to 6.3 times in travel speed. But in terms of ability, Shin Godzilla has a massive advantage. Not only does it have an actual healing factor, but also having the atomic breath, which in terms of power is massively larger than anything Clover has been able to do, with its exhaust alone being 30 more times powerful than Clover, let alone the actual atomic breath, reaching around 3 to 10 megatons, making it around 3,000 to 10,000 times more powerful than Clover. But there's even more to this fight. In terms of durability, both of them have issues in terms of taking the other out. But if we are going to use the highest possible scaling they can get to, Shin's best would be around 985 kilotons, but Clover's best scaling gets him to around 75 megatons, being around 75.3 times tougher. Also meaning that Clover can actually tank Shin's atomic breath if we grant him the scaling. But there's also an issue. Shin is also way tougher than Clover's best attack, by around 985 times over. Meaning this becomes even more of a struggle for them to actually take the other out. but both do actually have ways of winning, which comes down to the last couple of other factors. Shin's high-balled maximum output atomic barrage being over 3 times anything Cloverfield has theoretically ever survived, meaning even a 21 barrage from his back only would be enough to kill Cloverfield. However, Clover can win if Shin runs out of stamina, forcing Shin to go into a sleep, which just allows Clover to basically wail on him all he wants and eventually take him out. So, which is more likely to happen? Well, this is where some other factors come from. At first is about speed. While Shin is definitely slow in comparison to travel speed, he can still really easily hit Clover. Shin can react at speeds around Mach 2 at minimum, and Clover's speed doesn't actually reach anywhere around close to that, so even if Clover is technically faster than Shin, Shin can still hit him. Especially since Clover isn't really known for dodging, maybe running away, but he can still be hit by missiles throughout the movie, and even with his durability, he can still be hurt by missiles, meaning that even if he could survive the atomic breath, which again is only theoretical max for Clover, which in this case he would still be hurt by the atomic breath regardless, and would still be hit by it. And this is where arguably the most important factor comes in: intelligence and how they fight. Now, admittedly, neither of these creatures are necessarily the smartest characters, but I actually would make the argument that Shin is more intelligent. For one, Clover, again, is really just a baby. They don't really have much proper strategy or attacking in mind when fighting, other than basic understanding that attack what's in the air because it's attacking me. And while Shin definitely also goes by that logic, Clover is a lot more drastic about it, fighting way more just like a massive physical brute. Shin, while isn't necessarily the smartest either, he does understand things when he's attacking, like which atomic breath he needs to use to hit the planes more, like with his back atomic breath. But another thing that helps Shin ironically here is that Cloverfield has to get close to attack him. And this actually favors Shin, even if he's not as physically powerful, because he can still take Cloverfield's attacks. With him only needing that one point blank shot from his back atomic breath, it's actually possible for Cloverfield to end up being caught in the blast, which would instantly decimate him regardless on the scaling you give Cloverfield. And Shin would likely go for this attack even if it wasn't necessarily on purpose. The difference is that Shin's victory is just a lot easier to pull off, since his energy reserves can last quite a while. Clover would most likely need to fight him for hours before Shin starts to run out, and I believe Shin would at least try the back atomic breath once, and I do find him likely to hit that atomic breath before running out of energy. So overall, between these two unstoppable forces, Shin just has way more going for him. Better abilities, being more powerful, and a surprisingly better fighter for this scenario specifically, and fast enough to hit Clover. Also, the fact that Clover, again, is just a baby and has a little harder time understanding what he needs to do in a fight. For me, this makes Shin a lot more likely a winner in this scenario. But yes, I do believe adult Cloverfield would win. The thing is like 2 kilometers tall, being the mountain level ranges just by sheer size alone. But maybe I'll leave that for another video. But for now, between these two tragic monsters of mayhem, Shin Godzilla is just the more evolved and adapted opponent for this fight. Shin Godzilla wins.